Mr. Davis. Do you think it possible to be solved?" After consideration, he said, "I think so." I then said, "You see that I made the great point of this matter that the war is no longer made for slavery, but monarchy. You know that if the war is kept up and the Union kept divided, armies must be kept afoot on both sides, and this state of things has never continued long without resulting in monarchy on one side or the other, and on both generally." He assented to this. The substantial accuracy of Mr. Blair's report is confirmed by the memorandum of the same interview which Jefferson Davis wrote at the time. In this conversation, the rebel leader took little pains to disguise his entire willingness to enter upon the wild scheme of military conquest and annexation, which could easily be read between the lines of a political crusade to rescue the Monroe Doctrine from its present peril. If Mr. Blair felt elated at having so quickly made a convert of the Confederate President, he was further gratified at discovering yet more favorable symptoms in his official surroundings at Richmond. In the 3 or 4 days he spent at the rebel capital, he found nearly every prominent personage convinced of the hopeless condition of the rebellion, and even eager to seize upon any contrivance to help them out of their direful prospects. But the government councils at Washington were not ruled by the spirit of political adventure. Abraham Lincoln had a loftier conception of patriotic duty and a higher ideal of national ethics. His whole interest in Mr. Blair's mission lay in the rebel despondency it disclosed, and the possibility it showed of bringing the Confederates to an abandonment of their resistance. Mr. Davis had, indeed, given Mr. Blair a letter to be shown to President Lincoln, stating his willingness, notwithstanding the rejection of our former offers, to appoint a commissioner to enter into negotiations, with a view to secure peace to the two countries. This was, of course, the old impossible attitude. In reply, the President wrote Mr. Blair on January 18 the following note: "Sir, you have shown me Mr. Davis's letter to you of the 12th instant. You may say to him that I have constantly been, am now, and shall continue ready to receive any agent whom he, or any other influential person now resisting the national authority, may informally send to me, with the view of securing peace to the people of our one common country." With this, Mr. Blair returned to Richmond, giving Mr. Davis such excuses as he could hastily frame why the President had rejected his plan for a joint invasion of Mexico. Jefferson Davis, therefore, had only 2 alternatives before him: either to repeat his stubborn ultimatum of separation and independence, or frankly to accept Lincoln's ultimatum of reunion. The principal Richmond authorities knew, and some of them admitted, that their Confederacy was nearly in collapse. Lee sent a despatch saying he had not 2 days' rations for his army. Richmond was already in a panic at rumors of evacuation. Flour was selling at $1,000 a barrel in Confederate currency. The recent fall of Fort Fisher had closed the last avenue through which blockade runners could bring in foreign supplies. Governor Brown of Georgia was refusing to obey orders from Richmond and characterizing them as despotic. Under such circumstances, a defiant cry of independence would not reassure anybody. Nor, on the other hand, was it longer possible to remain silent. Mr. Blair's first visit had created general interest. When he came a second time, wonder and rumor rose to a fever heat. Impelled to take action, Mr. Davis had not the courage to be frank. After consultation with his cabinet, a peace commission of 3 was appointed, consisting of Alexander H. Stephens, vice president, R.M.T. Hunter, senator and ex-secretary of state, and John A. Campbell, assistant secretary of war, all of them convinced that the rebellion was hopeless, but unwilling to admit the logical consequences and necessities. The drafting of instructions for their guidance was a difficult problem, since the explicit condition prescribed by Mr. Lincoln's note was that he would receive only an agent sent him with a view of securing peace to the people of our one common country. The rebel Secretary of State proposed, in order to make the instructions as vague and general as possible, the simple direction to confer upon the subject to which it relates, but his chief refused the suggestion, and wrote the following instruction, which carried a palpable contradiction on its face. In conformity with the letter of Mr. Lincoln, of which the foregoing is a copy, you are requested to proceed to Washington City for informal conference with him upon the issues involved in the existing war, and for the purpose of securing peace to the two countries. With this, the commissioners presented themselves at the Union lines on the evening of January 29, but instead of showing their double-meaning credential, asked admission in accordance with an understanding claimed to exist with Lieutenant General Grant. Mr. Lincoln, being apprised of the application, promptly dispatched Major Thomas T. Eckert of the War Department, with written directions to admit them under safe conduct if they would say in writing that they came for the purpose of an informal conference on the basis of his note of January 18 to Mr. Blair. The commissioners, having meantime reconsidered the form of their application and addressed a new one to General Grant which met the requirements, were provisionally conveyed to Grant's headquarters, and on January 31 the President commissioned Secretary Seward to meet them, saying in his written instructions, "You will make known to them that three things are indispensable, to wit, first, the restoration of the national authority throughout all the States; second, no receding by the Executive of the United States on the slavery question from the position assumed thereon in the late annual message to Congress, and in preceding documents; third, no cessation of hostilities short of an end of the war, and the disbanding of all forces hostile to the government. You will inform them that all propositions of theirs not inconsistent with the above will be considered and passed upon in a spirit of sincere liberality. You will hear all that they may choose to say and report it to me. You will not assume to definitely consummate anything." Mr. Seward started on the morning of February 1, and simultaneously with his departure the President repeated to General Grant the monition already sent him 2 days before: "Let nothing which is transpiring change, hinder or delay your military movements or plans." Major Eckert had arrived while Mr. Seward was yet on the way, and on seeing Jefferson Davis's instructions, promptly notified the commissioners that they could not proceed further without complying strictly with President Lincoln's terms. Thus, at 9:30 on the night of February 1, their mission was practically at an end, though next day they again recanted and accepted the President's conditions in writing. Mr. Lincoln, on reading Major Eckert's report on the morning of February 2, was about to recall Secretary Seward by telegraph, when he was shown a confidential despatch from General Grant to the Secretary of War, stating his belief that the intention of the commissioners was good, and their desire for peace sincere, and regretting that Mr. Lincoln could not have an interview with them. This communication served to change his purpose. Resolving not to neglect the indications of sincerity here described, he telegraphed at once, "Say to the gentlemen I will meet them personally at Fortress Monroe as soon as I can get there," and joined Secretary Seward that same night. On the morning of February 3, 1865, the rebel commissioners were conducted on board the River Queen, lying at anchor near Fort Monroe, where President Lincoln and Secretary Seward awaited them. It was agreed beforehand that no writing or memorandum should be made at the time, so the record of the interview remains only in the separate accounts which the rebel commissioners wrote out afterward from memory, neither Mr. Seward nor President Lincoln ever having made any report in detail. In a careful analysis of these reports, The first striking feature is the difference of intention between the parties.